Hey everyone, welcome to the very first episode of the Sports Psych Show. I'm so excited to finally be doing a podcast. It's something I've been thinking about for such a long time. On the show, I'm going to be speaking with leaders in their field. I'm going to be talking to sports psychologists, sports scientists, coaches, coach mentors, teachers, mainstream psychologists, and I'll even speak with elite competitors. My passion is to demystify sports psychology for players, coaches and parents. So I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to find out how we drive participation. What motivational tools engage people and inspire them to play and stay in their chosen sport. I also want to learn how players progress quicker and more effectively. What actually is great practice and training. And I want to uncover the strategies that help players high perform more consistently under pressure. I know there's lots of you out there who are also keen to know the answers to these types of questions, and that's what the Sports Psych Show is all about. In this first episode, I've got the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Ed Coughlan. Ed is regarded as one of the leading skills coaches in sport. He's got a PhD in skill acquisition. He's a lecturer at both the Cork Institute of Technology and University College Dublin, and he's worked with a wide range of competitors and coaches, including from the English Institute of Sport, Great Britain Shooting, UEFA, Chelsea Football Club, St Helens Rugby League, Scottish Curling, and with a number of golfers on the European Tour. Ed is great company, and I always learn loads talking with him, and I know you will as well. So let's not delay this any longer. Introducing Dr. Ed Coughlan on the very first Sports Psych Show. So, Dr. Ed Coughlan, thank you so much for joining me on the Sports Psych Show. It's great to talk to you, mate.
Yeah, it's great, and thank you, Dan. It's an absolute pleasure. I know our chats in the past have always left me with a load of questions for myself to go away and think. I'm engaging in that process now with you to absolutely fill my head with thoughts for afterwards. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
No, well, mate, I remember when we had a Skype chat at the beginning of the year, and it left me sort of filled with lots of questions and lots of thoughts, and some of what we talked about was some stuff that I was really aware of and I do on a day-to-day basis, and other stuff was really new to me, so it's absolutely superb, and that actually prompted me to come to Ireland back in April to your movement and skill acquisition conference, which was brilliant. There was lots of great seminars, lots of great conversations. I learnt loads. I had great pizza, Cork pizza, only second to Italian pizza, I think, and a fair quantity of beer alongside Dr. Shuttleworth, I seem to remember.
Yes, yeah, that's okay. That sounds like a good experience. I think when you go back and mention that event, you know, when Ollie Logan, Phil Carney, myself, and Alan Dunton were thinking, okay, we're going put something like this on. The one thing that we actually wanted for the event to try and do was just engagement with people, you know. And I think even what you just said there, almost the stuff that happens away from the formal setting is where you get some really nice interaction and engagement with people. And I think what happened in Cork back in April, when myself and the three guys kind of reflected on, we're saying, you know what, I think everyone will take away from it what they want, but there seemed to be an overarching theme that the engagement was good. And I think after that, then it's just up to people just to either go down rabbit holes with other people or not, as the case may be, you know. But first and foremost, try and get the engagement high. And I think, as you said there was very good engagement for those couple of days, you know, which I think has spawned a lot of other chats around the place. And again, they were always probably going on already, but it's also good to, you know, just be a part of adding to it in some small way.
Well, you use the term engagement, mate, and I tell you what, you are. I don't know if you'll be thrilled, delighted, appalled, whatever. You're the first guest on the Sports Psych Show. You are my first interview. So, and the reason being is because, again, I come back to this word engagement, which I think is so important in coaching circles. But I couldn't think of a better person to have on my podcast in terms of engagement, in terms of energy, high energy, alongside knowledge. You know a bit as well, I have to say.
The more I think I know, the more I realise I don't know that much.
No, I couldn't think of a better person to with your energy, and you really ran that conference brilliantly well. You were the glue that stuck it all together, and it was a skill acquisition conference, which was kind of out of my comfort zone. And I say kind of because I've been blessed to work with a number of skill ac coaches over the past few years within my role as a sports psychologist, and I know how closely related they are, mate. And I tell you what, in preparation for this podcast, because I do like to practice what I preach now and again, so I did actually do some preparation. I looked at your Twitter feed, and there's loads that we can talk about, loads of value bombs on there that we can give to the Sports Site Show audience. But I also went onto your website, and there was a really interesting passage in your mini biog where you're ferociously selling yourself as a man of expertise, which you are. But let me quote this. So, skill acquisition is the perfect blend of coaching science, sports science, and sports psychology. All three domains are in a constant flow during a session as I connect with an athlete to unlock their potential. And that really hit home, not only for its eloquence, the eloquence by which you write, mate, unless you had somebody to write it for you.
I wish I had a staff of people who were writing all this stuff for me.
Absolutely. But, that really hit home. And I know how much of SkillAC is sports psych, and I know that sports psych involves SkillAC. So it's a big part of your role, isn't it, sports psychology?
Oh, it's huge. It's an important, I suppose, distinction, because I'm very careful to let people know that I'm not a sports psychologist, because I have an appreciation of the training that is required from that. For that, I have appreciation for the path that people undergo to become an accredited and qualified sports psychologist, and that's not the path that I've taken in my job as a practice coach, let's say, and a skill act coach. However, in all of my training in skill act, and when I was doing my work with Mark Williams and Paul Ford and John Moores University in Liverpool, our research unit and our team were housed in the sports science department, but in the psychology part of that space. Our lab was the brain and behavior lab. Our journal club that we used to run every few weeks with the other postgrads and the like. All our journals were coming from journals like the Journal of Learning, Memory and Cognition, the Journal of Experimental Psychology, Applied, the Journal of Sport and Exercise Psych, Journal of Applied Sports Psychology. So they're massively linked, even though they have very distinct roles in one sense. And the thing that I'm finding is I don't think I could do what I do without an appreciation and as good an understanding of sports psychology in one sense, or just the basic principles of psychology. Without my appreciation of that side of things, I'm not too sure I would be able to have that connection. The other side of it for me is to also know other elements of the performance space, to then know where I can't go with the athlete. So, and I mean this across the performance space. I have an appreciation, again, my background is in sports science, I have an appreciation of nutrition. But when an athlete is talking to me and all of a sudden they start having those questions with me in the middle of a session, it could be in the middle of a skill act session, I'm like, oh yeah, I know what you mean. I've got a guy or a woman that I'm going to connect you to. Or all of a sudden something arises back in the conversation we're having where I'm thinking, that's a very sport psych related issue here that's taking me out of my comfort zone, and I need to have the understanding and awareness of where I'm out of my comfort zone. As the saying goes, yeah, great, have an understanding of where you can be strong, but equally know where you're not strong, and don't try and fake it, and don't try and I'll give it a go. No, if that situation arises, I will then happily again divert that person and direct that person towards someone who is completely in that space, And I think that's one of the things that I've been trying to do over, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years, is trying to get an understanding of all of the facets that come into it, to know, number one, okay, this is right in my area, so I can go strong here. Have enough about all the other facets to be able to have some good conversations with people along the way. And know when to get out of their head. Get somebody who's absolutely in this space, in the same way you are in your space, but they're in their space, and to be able to have that redirection happen, let's say, So when I say that sports psychology has a huge part to play in what I do, it does, to create the right environment and to create that good interaction and connection, the listening skills and so on and so forth. But it's also to have it and to know where I should not go, essentially.
Absolutely, and you mentioned interaction, connection. That communication piece must be so important in your role when you're developing, when you're helping a player develop skill, when you're helping a coach help players develop skill. So in many respects, you've got to have a real appreciation for how players and coaches interact, how you can best interact with a player to help a player develop skill.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Again, probably leaning back onto the sports psych side of things, what I would have learned from my readings and whatever else is to how to create that space where that interaction and engagement happens, and a lot of that is through questioning. So I've been very fortunate, a bit like yourself, in my area of Skillac, to be involved in spaces where there have been some exceptional sports psychs, and nutritionists and S&C coaches, and others, little like what you experience yourself. When you're in that right environment, and all the wheels are all turning in the right way, it's not that everyone gets on, it's all big happy families, but there's just there's a massive sense of respect within that environment, where interaction sometimes can be fractious, but it's because we're all trying to go in the right direction as fast as possible, because it's high performance sport, it's elite sport, or whatever you want to call it. But what also you get from that is just how that interaction is best served if you spend more time asking questions and listening, rather than trying to get your I want to be heard saying something now. And I think that's where sports psychology has helped me a lot. In fact, even when I go way back to reading work from Ken Hodge and the likes from years ago, one of the key principles of his work was you just have to let the room and the atmosphere, the situation or the environment settle, and that's one thing that I would have learned, because, as you said at the start, I can talk. So my job has become, over the years, to know when to shut up, and then when I think it's okay to talk, well, to do that through a question that is hopefully going to lead me to a place where I can just shut up again.
That's so interesting, because, as you said, it almost feels, Ed, like that within effective coaching, if that's the right term, you have to ask effective questions. You have to ask questions. You have to question players so they're involved with the problem solving, with the solution finding, so that it's meaningful to them. You're sort of climbing inside their world. But at the same time, you specifically, and I can imagine this is like a lot of coaches, you're a big bubbly personality, perhaps you're quite extroverted, if that's the right personality term for you, and you're passionate about what you do. This is your passion, your joy, your hobby, and you know a lot about it. And there must be that sort of cognitive dissonance in your mind and through your body of, I really want to say this stuff. I've got a lot to say, but at the same time, you've got to be able to temper that feeling of wanting to get involved. And just ask questions, give the player space, or the players space to answer. Give them the platform. This is their show, not my show as a coach. But there's everything about you that wants to speak up.
Well, I just written down 3 words there that you mentioned that have, because one of the big ones for me is about effectiveness. Okay, and in the same way, when I reflect on how effective I am, to be honest, very often in the past I would have maybe had that stark realization that I wasn't as effective as I thought I was, and I suppose going to Rick Shuttleworth's phrase of cut, bleed, and bandage, to first of all, be exposed to that with someone in a mentorship space, but also to actually be prepared. And I actually was quite interested in doing it for myself, to actually cut myself and to see, okay, well, yeah, it wasn't as good as you thought it was, and why? Where's the effectiveness? And then that's when I started realizing, and it's like everything, there are incredible carpenters in the world that you can learn from, but you equally can learn from really bad carpenters. So in the same way, from a skill act space, in the same way, from a nutrition, the same way from in the show we're on, sports psych, I have learned great things from great sports psychs, but I've also learned great things from really poor sports psychs. Why wouldn't there be? Of course there are. There are poor surgeons out there who aren't good at their job, and as there are in every walk of life.
As long as no poor surgeon comes anywhere near me, mate. That's for sure.
Isn't that the case though?
Yeah.
We know of them, but then we're almost frightened of our lives to engage with anyone who has that, almost in one sense. Number one, maybe the ignorance of where they think they are, but they're not, and so on and so forth. So that effectiveness for me is what really interests me in that space. So then when you then talk about passion and being an extrovert and so on and so forth, I don't know. Again, I don't know, is that something that I can maybe comment on, let's say. But when I talk about passion, that's something that really ticked me off earlier in my career, because I think I could have sold sand to someone who lives on a beach based on my passion. Yeah? But I also began to realize, geez, Ed, you can talk, and you could actually, you could go in and make it sound great and so on and so forth. But I was very conscious about 14, 15 years ago, Dan, that what was behind the passion was very shallow. And that's what drove me towards back into academia, back down the PhD route, to actually be like, okay. And what came to me back then, around 2003 or so, maybe a little earlier, is that I didn't know how to learn. And that's what sent me. I wanted to learn how to learn. And because passion, as you say, passion can hide a huge amount of absolute codswallop, because when we all know these guys, he and she's a great speaker, but then we actually maybe dig a little deeper from some questions, you're like, whoa, that's not the kind of answer I was expecting. There was not much rationale behind what they've been doing for the last hour. The evidence that they cite and why they do it and how to do it, geez, that's not very up to date. It's not even appropriate. It's not even relevant to what they're doing. You know what I mean? And I think I was in that space, and I'm not saying I'm not in that space anymore. I'm saying hopefully in the last 15 years I'm getting further away from that space, where I don't ever want to lose my passion because for what I do, because it just really excites me. I really like the work I'm doing. I feel very fortunate to do the work I'm doing. But I didn't know what I was maybe doing. The passion kind of got me so far, and I didn't know how to learn.
Would you say, when you reflect back as a coach, because you're a skill acquisition coach, when you reflect back, I always say there's a bit of a continuum, and I'm really looking at this from a very basic perspective, within coaching, and that's kind of on the left side of the continuum. You've got the academia side, the knowledge, the theories, if you like, the even best practice, and whether that's experiential or empirical on the left side. And then you've got the right-hand side, the far right-hand side, which could be described as the passion, the punch the air. At its far extreme, it's the punch the air and come on, you can achieve anything. And myself, my personality as a coach, my bubbly personality, my enthusiasm can rub off and make a big difference. I always say that I try, and I mean, I'm sure we go up and down that continuum, but I try to hit somewhere in the middle. I'm certainly not going to be the guy who punches the air and says you can achieve anything, because there's not enough substance to that. There's no theory, there's no empiricisms, there's no experiential evidence. At the same time, what I appreciate is when I deal with human beings in an ever-changing environment, and I deal with coaches who have a certain level of knowledge and a certain voice, and a certain language, and I deal with players who have a different level of knowledge, a different viewpoint, a different voice, then it really is that craft of combining the two. And how much you use of both will vary from day to day and moment to moment and context to context and situation to situation, but it's the ability to combine the both. And what I hear you say is, historically, I've had this passion because it's me. I can, as you say, sell sand to somebody who lives on a beach, right? But I needed to learn more. I needed more depth to my knowledge, and I may not be there yet, and may never be there, but I'm getting better at getting that balance.
Well, and do you know where it came from? For me, anyway, and it's like anything else. This is just my experience of it. But it came from when I started to realize that the questioning path was something that the athletes would thrive in, because it gave them a space to explore so much more in their environment. And when I would start asking questions, of course, that would then encourage athletes to ask questions back of me. And I suppose I was just struck by how shallow my depth and breadth of the information that was out there. And when I dug a little deep, and I'm going way back now to when all of a sudden I found a paper by Bruce Abernethy and Damien Farrow, and all of a sudden I was like, what? There's actually guys who do this, and do it in a really useful way for coaches to act, and also to be able to read their work and not feel like, my God, the way they've written this makes me feel stupid because I can't understand it. No, they didn't. They wrote it, even in an academic journal, in a way that I could grasp, and I was like, oh, I get this, and there's actually takeaways for me, and there's so then all of a sudden that, as I said, that made me realize. I've got to I need to have a rationale. If I'm going to go down this route of challenging the athletes through questions to allow them the space to explore. And Sean Mishka and Ross Cooper sent me a brilliant quote that they kind of came up with themselves, which is that idea of the problem is the answer. The question is the answer. The problem is the solution. So the question that you ask, if it's a good enough question, well then, if it's a good enough question, it's good, and it's the appropriate time and the right whatever, well then, if they actually come up with the answer, it's going to be the answer that's going to set them free. So that's from the interaction from a verbal situation. Mm-hmm. Now, if you put a problem in front of them, and if it is the right problem at the right time with the appropriate task difficulty for where they are, and they solve that problem, again, you've made the boat go faster. You've improved it. If you come up with the right problem and then let them go away and try and solve it. And if they solve it, we're moving on again, And what I started to realize in myself is that if I'm going to go down this path, I want to be able to have a really strong evidence-based rationale for every single solitary thing I do for an athlete. If I've been hired to improve the performance of an athlete from a skill acquisition perspective so they can perform what they do, when they want to do it under pressure and not feel the same, not respond in the same way that you might normally under pressure, but the way you'd love to, I need to have a rock-solid rationale for some of the cookie stuff I'm going to get them to do. Because that's the thing, you've got to take them away sometimes to bring them back. Even though that the task is still specific to what you're doing and so on and so forth. But that's why if you're going to ask questions, you're going to have to expect questions back. And that's where then that rationale needs to be something where you are being so completely and utterly honest and truthful at it. You're not just selling them a line here. It's not my opinion anymore. This is the opinion of others. Because you know what? It's not even their opinion. It's just from empirical research where they were able to show that this is actually something that is worthy of a look. They can't say it can prove anything, but they're saying this is worthy of further investigation and examination. And if you can pick the right time and place in your session to use it, you have a very good chance of this actually, impacting positively on your work.
That's really interesting because, this is something I have conversations with coaches about all the time, is this use of, you use the term empirical evidence. So let's say the use of science and scientific evidence, journal articles. And it sounds to me, Ed, like you'd actually, if you've got a player in front of you, and that player is asking questions relevant to what you're doing, is perhaps questioning you, it sounds to me like you will quote them the science. You will talk to them about the science. Is that the case, mate? Will you actually refer back to the science in some cases?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying, in one sense, I'm trying to remove I'm trying to almost remove the personal situation, the subjectivity out of it. Because if the athlete is saying, geez, why are we doing this today? And said, well, based on what we've been doing, where we're going, I want to try this. Okay, and where's that come from? Well, actually, there's some evidence to suggest that, and that's that's all you can do. There's evidence that will suggest that this is an appropriate, and then you get the question, all right, but we don't know for sure. And I'm like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
And again, back in the day when it was just the kind of passion of Ed that was kind of getting you through, then I wouldn't have been so, I suppose, so open to the fact saying, I don't know. So how can I know? I'm not a clairvoyant. We're gonna now look at it, and then we're going to pressure test it, and then we'll know. We're going to know. Okay, go further down this rabbit hole or not. But I'm not going to, and we'll pressure test it regularly so that we don't go so far down a rabbit hole to only realize is this working when we're in competition. No. I'm going to pressure test the absolute life out of this throughout the session so that we're getting flags, red flag, stop it, green flag, keep going all the time.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's one of the things that I think keeps that interest going. We're just trying to figure stuff out. And what I'm trying to do with athletes and players and whatever and coaches is to encourage people to almost, it's not a quick fix thing. It's a series of puzzles that we're going to try and figure out. Now, if your job in your sport, whatever that sport is about problem solving, is about decision making, well then let's become world class at problem solving in practice. Let's become world class at decision making in practice, and let's create an environment in there where you are completely au fait with the potential of failing, because you actually realize the failing is where you'll find those solutions. You will find those decisions. Not in it was all perfect and that was an amazingly slick and perfect practice session, but the representativeness of what that actually looks like compared to where you're going to need to earn your money, live thrive and strive in your career is not there. And that's that mismatch that I'm always trying to fight against.
That last point failing and allowing players to fail. I'm going to come back to in a second, but just coming back to what you were talking about earlier about introducing the science. I mean, I completely agree with you, and I think it's something that I think as a practitioner, whether you're a coach, whether you're a sports psych, whether you're a skill act coach, you don't always get it right, but I think that, I mean, in the last week or so, I can think of a very high-profile athlete I was working with in a specific sport, and was talking to me about doing psychology on the run, because I was talking to him about how, you know, the game that he competes in works in seconds, but the brain and the nervous system work in milliseconds. Mm-hmm. You know, the game he plays, the sport he's good at, trumps. The brain and the nervous system trump that sport for speed every single time. And so having the capacity to deal with the thoughts and feelings that are being thrown out into his mind all the time by the brain and the nervous system would be a useful thing to do. And he sort of said, yeah, Dan, I hear you, and you know what, this is what I do this on the run. I check in with my body, you know, I kind of pay attention to how I'm feeling in certain parts of my body. And I'm sort of sitting there thinking, wow, this sounds like embodied cognition to me. And so it was kind of my 15-20 years of experience sitting there, and I think this is an important conversation to have, because this is about coaching experience and your gut feeling. And I'm thinking, can I, with this player, introduce this term embodied cognition? Can I do that? Because, you know, I know for some players or for some sports people that I work with, they'd either ignore it or it would confuse the issue even more. Whereas this player, I knew and he was really interested, and I pointed him in the direction of a TED talk and a piece of literature, and actually it brought to life this conversation. And I think it was great as well, because this player kind of was in a space where he felt, hey, no psychologist can tell me anything more about psychology in my sport, and it was a great moment to experience. It's just, but there's definitely some players where you have to tread a bit more carefully, and with another player I might use the term body language or body controller or something like that to talk about what that person was doing. So I think you've got to gauge, you know.
Is that not in everything though? You know, you'll see that again. Go back to my carpenter friend. You know,
yeah.
You get a guy into your house to put in new wardrobes, and if he's in a house of a family where there's someone who's really interested in DIY, they're going to ply him with questions, and why are you doing this, and and what's the name of that hinge, and what's that wood, and what handle, and why that screw, because they're into it. You could go into the very next house, another house the next week, and put wardrobe into a house, and they're like, yeah, just put up, we don't really care, do they work? And they'll have no questions for him, and he'll be like, okay, I just go in and do my job and get out of there. So I think that's our job when we're working with athletes and coaches, to be able to gauge it. But even in the gauging of it, are we not allowing that that space and the interaction of us with them and the environment tell us an awful lot, you know? Tell us so much more than maybe speaking would have actually would have blocked it out, you know, just by, you know, but trying to force the issue, let's say, or trying to over egg something. And you're like, actually, you know, for some people it's less, and for other people it's more. And again, if you ask me how do you do that, I can't tell you. I don't know. I don't know. And I think, and that's something that's come up with, you know, some interesting conversations I've been having recently. But like even where we are nowadays, there's a guy, Tim Buzzers, down in Australia, and he has a really nice blog and little website he does, that he synopsizes research papers, right? And the amount of people that I know, and even students of mine here in CIT, who'd be like, "Oh, it was really handy just to go there to read that, and then go and read the paper, because then I was reading it, and it's become a very useful vehicle for people to, you know, find out more." And then you've got and there are other spaces you can go for even more detailed stuff, but it's all about trying to measure what's required in the situation, and in the hope that you then get that right. Knowing, of course, No, and of course, there's going to be times you're going to get it wrong, and you're going to talk to the guy about the embodied condition, and you'll see the eyes glaze over as he's talking about, yeah, I'm looking forward to that box set tonight, and you're like, oh, I've lost him. And if in that moment when you realise that you've lost him, that you don't call it, I think that's the first step in losing that interaction, that athlete.
Ed, that happens to me in all social interactions, mate.
Yeah,
I mean, even when I'm at the bar with mates who have no interest in sport, so the glaze going over their eyes. I'm world class at recognising when people are bored of me.
But it's an interesting one, though. It's an interesting one when we're in our workspace. What we tend to do, we get so, and again, that's going back to the passion. We get so excited about talking about what we're doing, and actually, what we should have been doing is talking with our mouths, yes, but really, really looking with our eyes. Do I still have them? And if I don't, well, first of all, call and say, look, sorry, I've lost you there. Where did I lose you? Where was? And almost a bit like, when you're on the phone with someone, you're talking away, yeah, I can hear, and all of a sudden, hello, and they could think they're still talking away, and then when they come, oh, I can hear you now. The last thing I heard was I went to the shop and I didn't hear anything from there on in. Oh, well, what I was saying is this. That's a critical moment in an athlete-coach interaction. Oh, hold up there a second. I think I've lost you. You looked like you were kind of phasing away from me. And call it and have that relation and be like, so can you go back and tell me where was the last time I had you? Because we might just cut it there. And you know what I mean?
And that's such an important point to make here to the audience of this show, because I think sometimes coaches we use this term passion, they're so passionate about accruing knowledge of their sport from a tactical perspective. And their model, if you like, it tends to be coach as knowledge provider.
Yeah.
Whereas, and maybe I can't think of a succinct way to put this, but as opposed to coach of co-creator of solutions. Yeah. But when you're in that latter space, you open up the ability to have a much greater social intelligence, to be able to, when you're not just immersed in this notion of, I've got this knowledge, I've got to give this knowledge, oh, I've seen that situation, here's the knowledge, here's this idea, here's that idea. And actually, you're just asking questions, you're intervening where appropriate, you're actually giving the players a little bit more cognitive load in terms of they've actually got to come up with some solutions to the problems. You can actually, as you say, you can look, you can observe, and you can make judgments from body language, from facial expressions, from general interactions between players, as to are they on board here? Are they focused? Are they listening? Are they in the right space? But if it's constantly, I've got to give the knowledge, and there absolutely can be a time and a place for that. I understand that, but you've really got to, for me, rather than being a provider of knowledge, it's a co-creator of solutions. You've got to give yourself a chance as a coach to be able to be a better observer of what's going on around you. Absolutely.
And I think that's, again, going back to that word passion. I did some work with, a couple of days work with an NGB there a while back, and Damien Hughes was also one of the guys who was also there doing some work, right?
So well, yep.
Yeah. So we were doing some work with the IRFU for a couple of days, and he was there, and I'd not met him before, and we'd not met each other. And I did something, he was doing something, I was doing something on the pitch, and he was doing something inside and stuff. And he gave a brilliant workshop, chat with the coaches there. And one of the things he's talking about, he said, we all go on, that's just a bit of banter. And he said, banter basically excuses the fact that someone's just been insulting. It's just another word for saying, well, actually, you weren't being very nice there. That's just a bit of banter. When someone then gets their back up, that's just a bit of banter. Sure, you relax. Why don't you just shut up? I was just having fun. And I see passion almost in the same way as that word. I see when I hear someone, if the only thing they've got to say about the person, he's got great passion, I see. Oh, that's shallow. That's a pool that doesn't go too deep. Because that's where I think I was, and it's not to lose the passion, but the passion can run away with you, and all of a sudden you're doing all the talking because it's just you love the sound of your own voice. And you're not observing, as you said, anymore, because you're just in your funk, doing your thing, being passionate. That's not helping anybody, really.
And you could take this way, and I don't want to dwell on this point of passion much longer because we've got plenty of other things to talk about, but the last thing to say on this subject is that for me, this spills into attitudes towards players as well. I think it's respectfully to anybody out there listening. Please remain a listener irrespective of what I'm about to say, but this myth of passion as a player. Oh, he's not passionate. Oh, he wasn't passionate in that game. And it's very much you listen to phone-ins on the radio and supporters devastated that their team has just lost 1-0 and Mesut Ozil's got no passion. This person got... And I actually got into a Twitter debate, and I don't know why, Twitter debates are the worst thing to do ever, and I limit it these days, but with a few Arsenal supporters, I think it was earlier this year, last season, and they were just saying, no passion, etc. Then they showed me a clip of a player just seemingly looking to walk around, and admittedly that player didn't have the world's greatest body language, but it's such a misunderstanding of elite sport. If we're talking about elite sport, it's such, players can't just run around like headless chickens. That's not how to be an elite player. If a golfer misses a 3-foot putt, it's not that they don't have passion. They misread it, or they didn't deal with the nerves, or they hit it through the break, so they hit it a bit too hard. If a footballer is there and isn't performing at their best, it's not because they don't want to. By and large, 95% of the time, you can get a footballer who's not happy with his or her situation or anything like that, and that can impact them on the pitch, and it's the wrong state for them to be in. But by and large, poor play happens not because of a lack of passion, but because of a lack of certainty of responsibility within the role, a lack of confidence, doubt, anxiety, worry, all the kind of vulnerabilities that human beings have. So, I want to close off the point of passion. I don't know if but
I agree. I think, and a little like that, it's very easy to say, "Oh, we lost. There was no passion in them." We all go. The coaches are inside in the dressing room giving a Braveheart speech, before they go back on the field or before they go on the field at all. Yeah. But it's your classic thing, "Oh, we lost. Oh, we're just not fit enough." From years ago, that would have been the first thing. "Oh, we're just not fit enough." You're thinking, there's got to be more to what's going to determine whether the performance, and that's the complexity. Then you're working in team sport for all of the different personalities that are at play there, and all of their life experiences that are coming into that dressing room, and so on and so forth. And equally, when you're working in a single pursuit sport, somebody who's doesn't play with a team in one sense, it's so complex to reduce it down, I think is unfair on the athlete, and I think on everybody else really as well.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking of more and more things to say, but I really want to close that bit down. And you talked about failing, and I promised we'd come back to this. And I go back, again, we're talking coaching here, and I go back to when I was a golf coach, and golf coaching is so intimate in terms of, you're there, by and large, unless you're doing a big group session, you've got one person there, and there's so many times, especially when I was coaching, when I had a lot of failure in the lesson. They were hitting it, they went from a beautiful 5-yard draw to suddenly top shots and shanks and stuff like that, and boy, if I could go back as a golf coach, I'd be so much better. That's why I'm a sports psychologist now, Ed, to work out where it all went wrong.
Rugby now, it's a lot easier.
Oh mate, yeah, absolutely. So but no, I still work with golfers, but it's, and I was that feeling of I've got to step in here, I've got to say something, I've got to give them more information. Again, it comes back down to giving information, and it doesn't matter. I've observed football coaches, rugby coaches, you can see it in their facial expression, you can see it in their body language when the activity isn't going according to plan. And I don't know how you feel about this, and yet those are in many respects how can I put it, the graceful moments that help players learn. They're the moments of grace. They are the key moments. They might be the uncomfortable moments for the coach. They might be the moments where you feel, wow, I've got to go and put this right. And you're the only person who will be able to see me here. I'm actually hugging myself because I'm thinking of the moments of clients really performing badly. But on so many, there may be times to step in, and I understand that, but so often you've just got to let that player or that client or that performer keep going, ask the right question, but often silence allows the struggle to find the answer.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because you brought up the sport of golf, and golf has a reputation for being a technical sport. Okay, it has a reputation for, let's get the technique perfect, and when the technique is perfect, then everything else will fall into place, kind of thing, and like all sports, it gets a bit of a bad rap too, because there is. The work I'm doing a little bit in golf nowadays, and the interesting thing is there are some brilliant thinkers in the space, but because the global thinking of what golf is that it's a technical sport. Yet you talk with Stuart Morgan or Peter Arnott or Mark Molan in Denmark, or any of these guys, and they're all really pushing the idea of, well, of course it's technical, because I think movement is technical, motor control, motor actions are technical, but how we get there, well, maybe there's another way, there's a better way, or maybe not better, but just a way that we haven't explored sufficiently enough yet, because we were so technical for so long. And sorry.
You know what? I want to jump in there, and I'm sorry to get you mid-flow, because I want to say this, because this podcast is about delivering to an audience. I want the audience to hear this, because you've summed it up. And you know what? And I know a lot of you in the space you're in, more of the ecological psychology space. It's so confused at times, and it's how you get there. It's how you get there. It's how you get there. And it might not just be telling that person what to do. In fact, more often than not, and what I've learned over the years is it's not telling that person about this supposed perfect biomechanical model. It's about helping that individual. And this is across all sports. Is across all sports. It's helping a person find their best way, and you'll use terms like degrees and freedom, and that might and Bernstein and stuff that might go slightly beyond the scope of today's chat. But when we cut this down, and I'm really sorry to interject in here, but you've got me started here, is that when we cut this down, it is. You know what, Ed, if I could go back coaching golf, you know what my first lesson would be? You know what my first lesson was 15, 16 years ago, and I gave thousands of them, was helping. Someone came along, here's a club, here's a bag of balls at the range, and I'm going to, first of all, help you to half swing, and I'm going to try and get you into the perfect position on the way back and the perfect position on the way through. Now, let me say, there is a slight morsel of me that still fights against that's the way to do it. Because there is an element of, this is an individual, I want them to do well, and we need that club head to move in a manner that helps them return it back to the ball. Great. Yeah. But what I know and what I feel in my heart now is the very best thing I can do. I've sabotaged you here, mate, so bear with me. We are coming back to you. The very best thing I can do is give that person a club, is give that person a bag of balls. And the first question I can ask, great question, in my opinion, I can ask is, show me what show me what a golf swing looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Show me what a golf swing looks like. Because, you know, when you do that, and I started to do that towards the latter part of my coaching career, boy, some of the swings you see are like, wow, that is just, you are showing me outstanding movement there. If I had tried to break that down to half back, half through, I would have ruined you before you even started. Now, from that moment of show me what a golf swing looks like, I can start playing around with helping them become more aware of the club head, helping them understand the dynamics of the club head, and helping them build and grow through understanding the club, and helping them search for different types of movements and what that does on the ball. But I'm going off on tangents there.
No, I
but
get
the
you.
point is, then I'm taking them on this journey of how to get to their best technique, if you like, and develop skill. So sorry, I sabotaged you. I went off on one there, but it's how we get there. And if a coach in their mind really has to, and till the day we die, there will be coaches out there who feel that they have to have this technical perfect model and they have to deliver that. That's their prerogative. That's their prerogative. I'm not going to tell them that's the wrong way. We can have a good conversation about it. But how...
Well, it's essential, though. I think that's the balance.
Yeah.
The technical model and so on and so forth, that's an essential part of it. And I think that's one of the things that I hope will come as the years go on, and is that there isn't the trepidation from the technical coaches when they interact and engage with people like myself, the practice coaches. That it's a pretty good marriage, in fact, because if you're talking about how do we get there, well, for all I don't know about the technique, okay, I don't have that knowledge that they have. But if we're trying to get there quicker, if we're trying to make the boat go faster, well, you're saying, and how do we get there? Well, I say we layer the session. We make sure that we make it as rich an environment as possible. We go to the evidence, the empirical evidence, and where there's been rigor and so on and so forth, and we say, well, you know what? And it's these buzzwords, the representative design. What are we doing in practice that is technical work that the swing coach, that absolutely critical, essential part of that golfer's team is doing? Now, Ed, how can I layer this session to make sure we get this golfer to where he or she wants to get to faster? Not, we're going to do this now, this long section here, and then we're going to do this, and it happens in a serial way. Because you got to do A before you do B, and then you got to do C, and then you got to do it. And obviously you're wondering, gee, this takes a long time. And every so often they'll perform in a way that you say, wow, it's working. But that's just a little insight into their potential. Because what happens after that? It goes back down again. What I'm doing in the work I'm doing with in that space is I'm going to create an environment in the practice space where it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G all at the same time. And it's going to be really ugly in there. And it's going to be really challenging. And there's going to be massive frustration. But there's also, if we can create the right environment, there's going to be massive figuring out going on.
Can you give me a specific example of what A, B, C, D is? I mean, obviously don't mention names, and I can give some examples as well. So specific examples for the audience.
So let's say if you brought up the sport of golf, okay? So and it's a nice example really for when you think of how it's seen globally as a very technical sport, let's say. But so is kicking a ball over the bar in rugby. It's very technical, and so is serving down the court from the vantage side and so on and so forth. So in the golf space, where what I've seen and heard and engaging with golf coaches and over the last while is they'll go into a very deep space of blocked practice to iron out a specific technical element of the swing, right? And they'll wait till that's nailed down before they bring context into the situation. Okay. Before they bring an external target or a cue, so on and so forth, before they bring relevance of what they're doing into maybe the rest of the swing, okay? Or before they bring maybe even a consequence into the practice session.
Yep.
So that, and again, each of those things that I've mentioned there, they're all A, B, C, D, E, whatever. Now, if we can get all of them in there all at the same time, it gets really messy, really chaotic, and really uncomfortable. But you know what? The richness of that practice space, when the swing coach and the practice coach are working in tandem with the player, is that the player will be like, I didn't have to hit so many balls today because every shot mattered. Every shot was loaded with all of the elements that I actually experience when I'm on the course. Because this is not about what we're doing here is not about trying to find the perfect swing. It doesn't exist. Because again, we've huge, and we're not going to go down that path. But the amount of evidence that tells us of our inability to repeat an action, just not, now as well, it's just not there. So rather than trying to chase that, well, let's chase relevance. Let's chase problem solving and figuring stuff out. And the more we can create a practice space where we are doing that and not just waiting for all the other pieces to be in place. I'm going to get A right, then B, C, D, E, F, G. Now we're going to put in a little bit of problem solving. And now we're going to... And you're like, well, Jeannie, Matt, that takes a long time. And I'll give you an example. I was at a golf course recently, and there was a guy practicing away from where we were working. And he had hit, 100 balls down into an area, okay?
Yep.
And the range around the central point that he was hitting to was probably, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 paces all around. So that's a pretty large space.
Yep.
And what did he do? He went down and he brought his practice ball bag into the center space and just knocked in one ball at a time in towards the bag.
Yep.
And then walked back out again and knocked them in a little bit further. And one would go out the other side. You'd have to knock that back in, right?
You just summed up my childhood in a sentence there. Yeah, go on, keep going.
One ball at a time, one ball. And you can see what he's doing. He's going to get all the balls in around the bag.
Yep, absolutely.
And then he put all the balls in together.
Yep.
Right? A very serial process, because I got to put all the balls in here first, and then I'm going to put all the balls into the bag. And I was watching this. I was like, "There's no way. This is not very efficient." Because this guy is obviously thinking, it'll be much easier in the end, because by the time I get them all in there, then they'll all be in one little space, and I can pile them all into the bag.
Yes.
And I'm looking at this guy, and I couldn't believe how long it took him to get all the balls in around the bag before he sat down. Whereas if he just picked up the nearest ball to him, and then the next nearest ball to him, he'd have finished after 100 picks, rather than probably 300 little mini hits to get them all in there, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
And that actually that is not a word of a lie. That actually happened, and that is perfect. It's not even an analogy, because it's a true story.
I was going to say it's an analogy, but yeah, okay, go on, yeah.
Because it is an analogy, but it's like this serial processing. I'm going to do all this first, then before I pick them up. And you're like, that's just not efficient. Now he eventually got there. He eventually got the 100 balls in the bag. But did it make the boat go faster? Did he get there quicker? No, he didn't, because he felt he had to do all of this before he can actually put the balls in the bag. And I think where I've been really fortunate in the last couple of years to interact with some golf coaches who are just so open to this idea of, okay, Ed, I'm going to invite you into our space here, because I want you to layer this session. When we pressure test this work, it doesn't hold up. So we want you to pressure test our space, so that I'll work away on the technical stuff. And whenever you feel, okay, lovely. So that's what you want him to work on? Great. Or she's going to do this right now? Lovely. Now I'm going to ask a couple of questions to layer it, to contextualize it, make it relevant, so on and so forth. Now do it. And it's like, whoa. And it's going to be really difficult in those moments, but that's what it's about. It's about being in those situations and having to try and figure it out, not breaking it all down into many, many parts and then building them all back up and then trying to bring in a bit of pressure and context and so on and so forth. And again, and I'm not saying this is the only way, but I'm saying that in my experience over the last number of years trying to do this, when you constantly pressure test the practice that I would do, this is the space that I found the fastest results. I couldn't believe when I started pressure testing this, when I would have an incredibly rich practice space, how quickly it transferred.
So,
and actually more, yeah. What?
Yeah, so, okay. So, and this is really, I'm with you, and this is what I've learned over the years, but there's still a part of my brain that wants to go back to that traditional form of coaching, if that's the right term, traditional, that is, and this is golf, but for everybody listening, think about your own sport here, think about what you play or what you coach, that if I'm working on technique, for instance, or I'm working on something to do with my golf swing, my technique, my kicking technique, whatever it might be, I have to groove it in. Yeah, I've got to groove it in a low pressure environment. I've got to groove it. And in my case, I grew up in a generation it was like, if your hands are bleeding, then you're practicing hard enough type thing, right? Yes. Fact is, I got worse as a golfer over 6 years. I was a better golfer at 17 years old off scratch than I was at 24, having played pro golf for 4 years. But that's another story. That's my sub story, right?
Yeah. But it's a common enough story.
Hey, Ed, you don't have to sell that one to me. I know, and I'm dealing with it every day just as you are. And I think it happens a lot in other sports. In fact, I know it does. And so I groove it, and everybody think of your own sport. I groove it, and then I go and pressure test it, or I have some pressure against me, whether that's having an opposition or whether it's a consequence in golf or something. And what I hear you say, so this is Ed Coughlan, kind of almost like selling himself to all the thousands of people who are going to listen to this pod, for want of a less crass way of putting it. Yep. What you're essentially saying is...
Here's my sales pitch.
What you're essentially saying is put this together. Stop it. Put this together. Because from a representational point of view, when you go out and you play on the course or the court or the pitch... doing this without pressure, doing this without B, C, D, and E, or C, D, and E, is waste of time is probably the wrong term, but it's suboptimal at least.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I like the players will still get there, and again, this is not to suggest that the traditional way that you would have grown up doing. The way that I would have when I was a young player and loving my golf, and players that I grew up with who were way better than me, and players who turned pro who were, you know what I mean? That's not to suggest that way may work for somebody. It may, of course, it may.
Yep.
But where we kind of are, because of where we've come from, the suggestion was that was the only way you could do it, and when you consider the specificity of training, when you consider the complexity of the individual, we've got to be giving people alternatives to how they get there. And the alternatives are, well, hang on a second, I have a lovely bag of alternatives over here. And there are many people like me who have a bag of alternatives. So Go explore what these alternatives could potentially do to the rate of uptake for the practice that you're engaging in, because that's key for me. We're not having a conversation today about participation and fun and all that, because that's a given at the younger ages, and even at the older ages, for people just to stay healthy and stay physically active. But we're having a conversation here about the infinitesimal percentage of those who want to become world class. There's an urgency about what they want. There's an impatience about what they want. Great, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with urgency. I have no problem with impatience. But what I will do to match that urgency and impatience is I'm going to create a space where that will be satisfied. Because if I actually do something else, that urgency and impatience will actually manifest into something even more damaging. Because I'm actually going to tell them, no, we're going to do this first, and then this, and then this, and this. But you'll eventually get there. Now, eventually get there is not an answer for someone who's urgent and impatient. So, and again, we're talking about these people who, as you said, you were a better golfer at 17 than you were at 20 odd. So we're talking about people who can do exceptional things with a golf ball already. What we've got to try and do is equip them, and not in a, I'm going to tell you how to do this, but equip them, put them in an environment where they themselves create their own tools. Not tools that they've taken from someone, but I'm actually, here, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put a toolbox down in front of you here, and you're going to decide what tools go into that because of what we're going to do here. I had a meeting there recently with a few guys, and Nick Winkleman, who you might know, he was here having a meeting with us, and again, Nick will be your classic case of what you described earlier with me. Nick is unbounding passion.
He certainly is. I know that much.
Unbounding passion. But Nick also has a rationale behind what he's doing.
He's got a deep knowledge.
He has
very deep knowledge.
Yeah, and he has an appreciation of where it's needed and so on and so forth. But also, and this is why, and again, as someone asked me there recently, you know, who are the people that you engage with and all this, and I said, well, yeah, and I was telling them all the different people. And I was, and they're like, all right, they're all good, you know, all this, and like, you must have great chats, and it must be great. And I was like, yeah, we disagree a lot. And then, how do you mean? And I was like, well, we disagree a lot. Like, this isn't a Brady bunch of coaches. In fact, I spend my time filtering from a professional perspective. Personal level, great, yeah. But on a professional level, I spend a lot of time trying to identify those people who are actually going to push back. I use this term a lot. I break out in a rash if I think someone is just around just to nod. Oh yeah. No, I'm looking for that coach to be like, yeah, but why, Ed? But where have you come up with that? Really? You think? And to keep, you know, and that's the key thing, to not play devil's advocate with me, because that's easy. I could go into the local hospital here and stand over a surgeon's shoulder and be like, and peer in over the top and devil's advocate what he's doing. You know, she might be this surgeon might just be doing a major surgery on the abdomen of someone, and I could just play devil. Oh, really? Is that what you're doing? Why aren't you doing it? That's not what I'm about. That's what I'm not seeking from these coaches that I interact with. It's pushback, and they have a rationale for why they're pushing back. That's a completely different space, because their experiences are also very well informed. And I think, as you're saying, you have that situation where you have these people who have the passion but have the rationale and so on and so forth, but also have this appreciation. This is about urgency at the level that we're talking about. If you're talking about urgency, you've got to layer it as much as you can.
I agree. And brilliant stuff. And as you were talking there, there were so many little things that came into my mind, and a couple of things that I'd like to say from what you've said there for the last 6-7 minutes is, you mentioned this hasn't been always in a conversation about participation, and actually this will be my one disagreement with you here, but I think you'll agree to my disagreement, which is it absolutely is. And I think that when we talk about coaches, I always talk about 3 Ps. In fact, 3 Ps are embedded into my psychosocial model, which is, you know, I believe every coach should be invested in being psychosocial coaches, and that is because every single coach on this planet, every single coach, whether you are an under-8s coach or you are Jurgen Klopp, whether you are a local under-12s netball coach or you are Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho, etc., if we're talking football speak here, they are invested in 3 Ps, and that is participation, progression, and performance. participation, progression, and performance. And those are the three things. End of story. There really isn't anything outside of those three things. And depending on what level and age group you're coaching, each one will take a different preference. But so I'm plucking Jurgen Klopp out the air. You know, he is involved in participation every day because he has to keep his players engaged. He has to have a football theory. He has to have a rationale behind what he's doing, as well as having this big bubbly personality, because he can have this big bubbly personality, which he does, and I'm sure is very, keeps players, I say amused, but certainly engaged, but he's also got to be knowledgeable, and he's got to have people around him that are knowledgeable, so players, he doesn't lose the dressing room, he doesn't lose the changing room, and so participation he has to be invested in. He also has to be invested in progression, helping players progress, and that might be done from using an ecological approach or a constructionist approach, or could be more of a cognitive approach. What he does is his business, and he will know what he does, but he has to help players progress, and then he has to help players perform. So those three P's, every single conversation you have, I have, we all have, is to do with those three P's. The second thing, I love what you said there, Ed, because this is what I've tried to do over the last couple of years as I've got to know you and Rick Shuttleworth. By the way, everybody, we've bandied around several names, and I should say Rick Shuttleworth is a skills coach, an Aussie skills coach based in England. Look him up.
He changed my life.
There you go. Look him up. Another name you mentioned was Sean Mishka, works in the NFL. Brilliant. Look him up. Tim Buzzard, you mentioned, Aussie guy. Look him up. Golf space,
if you're in the golf space, people like Peter Arnott and Graham McDowell.
Yeah, Stuart Morgan. Stuart Morgan. Look them up on Twitter, everybody.
Yeah.
So what I've tried to do is try to, because I have this thing whereby I've given you the three names there: ecological coaching, ecological approach, constructionist approach, and cognitive approach. So cognitive being more instructional, constructionist. Really more about helping, you might be instructional, or you might change the task in the environment to help players learn implicitly, but what you're trying to do is establish meaning. You're trying to get inside the brain of that player, see what they see, and help them create meaning around what you're trying to deliver. And then the ecological coach, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is much more, it's more implicit, it's task, it's environment. You can still be directive, but you're being directive towards task and environment. Would that be a fair thing to say? To develop an implicit, but we'll come back to that if you want. Because you're looking at me there. So, but the point is, what I like what you've said. What I like, because again, I think people get this wrong. They see yourself and Rick Shuttleworth and saying, this is the only way to do it, and you said it's not the only way. It might be, in my opinion, the most efficient way. It might be the most optimal way. It might be that I think everybody in 30 years' time will be doing this because what we learn about the brain and the nervous system and its relationship with the environment actually shows us so much evidence that this is the best way to do it. But it's not the only way, and that rings true with me, because I try to take myself above the debate, if you like, and go, okay, I've had so many rich experiences, from so many sides of it, or both sides of this argument, and the reality is, Ed, is there are golfers, if I'm using golf as an example, who will come to you and go, yeah, but hang on, Ed, actually, when I hit 1,000 balls, and I know it's laboured and I know it's slow, that helps build my self-efficacy. Yeah. I wouldn't use the term self-efficacy. That's me being a psychologist. That helps build my confidence. I've had so many golfers who said to me, when I stand on that first tee, and this is the meaning they create about, I know I've played more holes, I know I've hit more balls than everybody else. And to take them away from that is high risk. To take them away.
But that's the key. Sorry to interject there, but that's the key for me between quality and quantity. Yeah. I'm in the business of convincing players that you can have that self-efficacy, you can build that sense of autonomy, you can have that self-confidence by saying that, well, you know what, each one of my shots is worth 20 of my older shots.
Sure. Absolutely.
And it's to have that, and I think that's what's so. And I know we've spoken a lot about golf. I didn't think it was going to go this way, but if I look at where golf is going, I'm really enthused, because I see a lot of players now with a team behind them.
Yes.
It's you look at a player will have his swing coach, brilliant. She'll have her practice coach as well. He'll have and the awareness is now in the space where people are now inquisitive. They're wondering, and it's becoming a space where the players themselves are realizing, come on, this isn't about a one-size-fits-all and one coach can do everything for me. This is about specificity. This is about specialism. And let's build a team of specialists that can actually make the boat go faster. And that is the player. And I've been really, as I said, really energized by what I'm seeing and hearing out there, that players, the essentials, they have their swing coach, essentially. They have now even maybe someone from a sports science space to do a little bit of work on the conditioning and the nutrition. Great. The sports psych, great. The practice coach, great. And the people who are having a big part to play in all this are their managers, the management company, who are like, you know what, the golf is, and again, I don't know, but maybe there's a realization when they look at other sports that there isn't just one coach with the player. There's a team of coaches, because it's important that all, and then again, going back to my opening kind of chat about all of this, it's not about the coach who has all the answers. It's about coaches who have sufficient interest in all the facets to be able to have meaningful conversations with the other coaches, where then potentially the questions that they're all able to, when they all kind of come together and align and have their arguments and have their fallings out and all of that, and then present something to the athlete that is going to make the boat go faster. Again, I use that term, but that doesn't mean. And some of the richest environments I've ever been in have been ones where there have been falling outs. There's been tension and whatever, but if there's been a fundamental level of respect for each other, based around that we're all in this for all the right reasons, it never developed into something caustic. It actually always worked itself out into, okay, that was really fruitful and that was useful, and because we all dealt with each other in the right way, we've actually moved on. We've moved to the next best place we can be.
Well, and I would use the term psychological safety, and the work of Amy Edmondson at Harvard University, which I think is, and another word I would use here is integration. So two terms here: psychological safety and integration. I think are the two coming. If I was a futurist involved in sport, I would say these two terms are going to be really important in the future. I think that when you are coaching at a club where you have, whether it's an academy, and it doesn't have to be elite level here, okay, but I guess I am talking about some clubs with some resources in place, because I understand there's going to be grassroots coaches who are listening and going, well, there's no way we've got a team because it's just me, and I appreciate that, and we'll come on to that in a second. But when you do have resources and there are maybe a few coaches or a series of coaches within an academy, there must be psychological safety, because there isn't one single person who has all the answers. And Amy Edmondson, I mean, I implore everybody to go and watch her TED Talk, read her stuff. She's mainly worked in organisations, and she originally started in healthcare, and she noticed that successful teams in healthcare were successful not because they made no mistakes, but they actually made lots of mistakes. But it wasn't that they made more mistakes than the unsuccessful team, it was just that they were open and honest about those mistakes. They were having conversations between each other. Now, when you're open and honest, clearly, I think conflict is the wrong word. There can be some tension, there can be some uncomfortable conversations, but you've got to have uncomfortable conversations to improve. You have to admit, and another word here, vulnerability, which is very relevant to the World Cup recently, with England doing well, and the alleged notion of suddenly we started to admit vulnerability here, that it's okay to feel anxious, that it's okay to feel worried, that it's okay to have doubts and stuff. And when coaches get together, I think you've got to admit vulnerability, and you've got to say, I don't have all the answers here. There is uncertainty. We have to work together as a team. Which, go on. Yeah,
I think the next level for me, where it brought me, was into that self-reflection. I would not have been a very reflective coach in my early days. Whereas now, at the end of each, let's say, it could be 2 weeks, but it's definitely at the end of each month, I'll go back and look back over all of my coaching notes, okay? And sometimes they can be anywhere. I don't, unfortunately, have it's in this book. It could be on the phone, it could be on the laptop, whatever. But I'll spend some time collating them all to go back and reflect on what were my thoughts in action at the time, that I'll just jot that, I had that thought there, and so on. So, geez, I said that there. I need to check in on that later on. Maybe even go back to the athlete and ask them, remember I said that yesterday, did that connect with you? Did that take you or not? That, for me, you go on about psychological safety and stuff. I think you can even take that to a personal level. To actually, it's almost a gift that keeps on giving. If you were prepared to go into that space of reflecting on what you've done, it's going to sting, but oh my God, the rewards, if you're prepared to actually let it sting, and that cut, bleed, bandage analogy,
Yep.
If you're prepared to, cut and then let it bleed a little bit and then bandage it, but making sure you're bandaging it, not in it to hide it away, but like, okay, actually I've taken something from that. That's actually something that I can use the next day. And that's why when I see, it's the odd time someone will ask, they might reach out and say, oh, I've seen some of the stuff you any chance I get to have a chat? And I'm like, of course, and they're all, and it's very, thank you so much for your time. That was really great. And I'm like, I took a huge amount from that. I hope you weren't thinking that this was only going to be one-way traffic, because, and I think that's something that we need to be better at, just opening up to having conversations with people from right across the performance space. And because the idea that, I'm on a call with someone and they're going to learn a lot from me, oh my God, get out of your own way, because that one-way street interaction, in fact, you know what, there's not even a one-way street, because you're probably not even helping the other person either. If you think this, this oracle of information, and it's just not, it's so poisonous for there to be any real progression of thought and any real advancement of thought. Because, as you said, I don't know where this kind of constraints-based work, the ecological psychology and the dynamical systems and practice, and the context relevance concept, I don't know where that's going to be in 5 years' time. But I hope it's going to be in a better place than it is now. And the only way I can be assured it's in a better place, and that might mean better in that it's gone, but better, the only reason I know it's going to be better is that if we just talk about it, try it, mess around with it, fiddle with the dial a bit, and don't be thinking, that's a really good signal, don't move, no one moved, it's perfect, here right now. And I think that's where a lot of sports, and maybe in years gone by, maybe less so nowadays, but in years gone by, maybe that's where the golf space was. It's about perfection. Don't do anything. And you're like, well, hang on a second. If I don't do anything, I'm frozen. And I think that's what I'm trying to encourage myself, but it's also the kind of environment I'm trying to encourage them with, the people I'm very fortunate to work with.
Brilliant. And the final. Okay, so the final, because I'm conscious of your time and everybody else's time here, but the final word that I had, sort of segueing into that, is integration. And it's the final bit of the conversation. I could be on this all day, every day, and we're definitely going to do this again. You're definitely going to be my first guest to come back again for a second time. I've got a few more.
Spirit of failing and reflection, your first one is never going to be your best one anyway. So you're going to go back and you'll look at it and so on and listen to it, and so
But I think I've peaked with my guest, though. The quality of my guest. I think I've peaked on number one. I should retire. I should retire straight away.
Battery. Get out of the.
It'll be everyone will look up the Sports Psych Show, and it'll just be one episode for the next 40 years, basically. Just you and me talking for an hour and a half about stuff, and at least we'll get some hits anyway. But look, the final thing here is integration, because I think that, you know what, I'm going to make a bold statement here. I hope that I will be on the pitch not on the pitch in a match, I can assure you this, but on the pitch in a training session, or regularly on the pitch in a training session, whether it's a Premier League or any other sport, with my boots on, not with trainers on the side of the pitch, but with my boots on, not playing clearly, but involved, integrated. And so when I'm using the term integration, I'm talking about capital letters, red ink, underlined. I think the skill act coach, the future of this, I think the future of sports psych, not all the time, not for everybody, but I think certainly those who are into the performance side of psychology and who are delivering in a manner where there's practical tools and techniques into players, and in a very robust way, are on that pitch, and they're getting real-time feedback from players, real-time feedback from coaches, having conversations on the go, on the run. I think that's imperative, and there's barriers to break down for that, even with the most open-minded coaches. But that, to me, has to be the future. And so I want to get your thoughts on that as a skill act coach. Will you be on the pitch in the future? And the second thing for me, because this is important here, is grassroots coaches. Because what tends to happen on this podcast, on podcasts in general, is we get carried away about working at the elite level, and then I've had so many grassroots coaches say to me, yeah, I love that podcast as well, but what about us? We have no support. And if we're going to use this term integration in a slightly different context, how do grassroots coaches integrate the kind of stuff you do on their own, or with just an assistant or volunteer, into their kind of space, into their space, in a limited time that they have? Can they do that? How can they do that? Because I'm trying to do that in sports psychology with using terms like game face and controllers and match scripts and squashing ants, just trying to bring it alive for them so that they can use it as coaches on the run, on the pitch. So the first one is, do you think you're going to be on the pitch in 5-10 years' time? And then how can grassroots coaches integrate your stuff?
Great question. I absolutely do see myself on the pitch. Integration, I think, is a lovely term to actually sum up that, in fact. I'll give you an example of how I kind of work, which leads exactly to that integration space. I might be approached to someone, I'd be interested in seeing what you do. Oh, yeah, okay, great. So how does this work? Well, I need to see you in all your spaces first. It's very often what I do. And this has been refined over years. And they're like, how do you mean? Well, let's say, for example, it's golf. I need to see where you practice. So I need to see a session where you practice. And then there may be 3 different places. You might be at the driving range. It might be the short game. It might be the putting space. Then I need to see you on the course. And then I need to see you in competition in some shape or form. And then we'll decide whether or not this is going to work out. And they're like, kind of why is the normal thing that I say, because and my answer to all of that is because I need to find out where I fit into that integration, as you say. Because if I meet with somebody and in each of those different environments, I'm thinking there's no space for me here. There's no need for me here. Great, we've saved ourselves a lot of time and a lot of money, and say great. But I don't want to go in and dive straight into a space knowing that there's all other spaces that this person exists and works and practices in without seeing all of them first, because they are a bit like your integration. They're all interrelated. They're all. It'd be like going on a I don't know. I'm trying to think of something, but going on a first date with somebody, and you're all excited and whatever, and after the very first date you're saying, yeah, let's move in and get married. I don't need to see any more. This is great. Like, you wouldn't do it. You'd be saying, okay, well, let's have a second date. Let's do it somewhere different the next time. We'd a restaurant this time, but maybe are you into the arts, okay, let's go to a show. Are you into sport? Okay, let's go to match. Because you want to see them in that environment. And then you don't want to make and for me, you talked about the passion, because there's a limited amount of passion before it begins to back into the psychological principles. I'm a husband and I'm a dad of 2. I've got to be able to manage my energy, because I want to make sure that the greatest amount of my energy is in that most important spaces, which is at home. Whereas if I don't keep a handle on the passion, as you were saying at the start, I know we've talked around that, but to get a better understanding of it, then it actually doesn't become what it can become. So that's where I go to find out where can I get in. And I'm going to see them in all their spaces first. So it's a kind of a slow process initially to decide whether this is going to be something. But it pays off for me. And a bit like the other way, rather than jumping in and just working with anybody and then find, oh my God, that was a rabbit hole I went down and that didn't work out. This way I can then find out, okay, actually I can have a big impact here. And just so you know how I work when you practice, I'm going to be there with you, because I'm going to constantly be looking at how I can make that space really effective to transfer into the other space where I won't be when you're competing. Oh, and there's another space you're doing here? Okay, I won't be here, but I need to know what you're doing here, because again, that's going to impact on when I integrate into your practice, and because it all links. It all feeds into each other. So when I was working towards that way of working and trying to fine-tune my own way of working and delivering a service, for want of a better word, I started trying to think of an acronym that would put all this together. And I came up with what I use now a lot, and it leads me into that space about the grassroots, because it's the exact same model I deliver to grassroots coaches when I go and speak with grassroots coaches. And the volunteer coaches, the mums and dads who are there, frightened of their lives when they're left alone with the kids. Okay, you have them for 30 minutes and away you go. And it's like, oh my word, what do I do now? So the model I came up with was PEAQ, P-E-A-Q. And what that does for me, it kind of centers me when I'm at work to make sure that my integration into the space is meaningful, is effective. And the P stands for praise. Okay, I'm a big fan of praise, not empty praise. I like the work of, is it Tim Rolnick, who goes on about the difference between praise and just being a compliment, Oh, well done, well, that's great. Whereas praise is great, but then if you have praise, oh, well done, but if it's the difference between that and an affirmation is huge. Well done, I like what you did with that pass.
Yeah.
It opened up space to the guy up in front.
Yeah.
So I'm all about praise, but only if it's praiseworthy. So I don't become just constantly well done, but so that they can really strongly attach. Oh, that was good, and that is it. So the next part then is E, explore. I'm really, really strong on myself, hard on myself, to make sure I leave loads of time for exploration, which when I talk to the grassroots coaches, they love that, because they're like, well, you mean I don't have to be doing anything? No. Set it up and let them explore in that space. Then the A is that affirmation that I spoke about earlier. If you see them doing something well, oh, well done, and then they do it maybe again, well done, that's a great pass. That's a great movement there to draw the attacker. Oh, that's a great put. You read that line very well. You've been working on your line reading. Great put, to link the praise to something like an affirmation. And then the last part, the Q, is question. So if I can find myself where I'm integrated, absolutely. I'm on the pitch. I'm on the court. I'm on the course. I'm at the side of the pool. Anyone I work with will tell you, I'm absolutely in the space where you practice, because you kind of hired me to make sure that practice space is as good as it can be. I can't do that over a phone, on a FaceTime, or whatever else. So that's why I spend a lot of time on the go, listening to all the great podcasts around the place and stuff. But then from the grassroots perspective, when I've given this model to people and say, look, go mess with it, go away and break it, because I don't know, this might just work for me. Don't be thinking, oh, this is from Ed and all of that. No, let's ditch the formalities. this is what I've given you. Come back and tell me, actually, Ed, I don't agree with this. How I don't know, I'm just freestyling this. Why can't it be DEAQ? And the D stands for discussion, or, Yeah. Brilliant. I love it, So this is just something that as I said, I'm throwing out to people for the last couple of years. But for the grassroots coach, what it does for them is it buys them time. There's nothing more frightening, I think, for the volunteer coach or the novice coach who's just maybe done a fundamental level of badge, or a level 1 badge, let's say, because they come away from those type of coaching courses with a bag of drills or a bag of games to play with. But they don't, and again, we'll go back to the earlier thing, they don't know how to learn yet. They don't know how to use them as just a launch pad to come up with a load of other games or drills or whatever you want to call them. So I think this sometimes maybe can help them to say, okay, so you're just saying I just need to set something up. Yeah, set it up. If it's something around the context of what you're trying to do, what would you like them to do? I'd like them to do some passing. Okay, set up a nice passing game. But then just step away. Let them be kids. Let them be youths. Let them be adolescents. Or let them be adults. Let them play, And then when you see something happening, well, then praise it. Great. And when maybe if you see them doing something that has been linked to maybe a directive that you gave them earlier, then affirm it. And then the cue for me, I use the 3 shut-up rule. And that's just a personal thing for me. When I'm in the coaching space, if I think there's something I need to do or say, I tell myself to shut up. And I do that on 3 occasions before I say anything at all. And then when I finally say something, I make sure it's a question. That's the cue. So I want to say something. Shut up, Ed. And I'll do that 2 more times. And then on the 4th time, if I really think this needs to be said, I'll actually say it through a question. And so even recently, I was doing work with a golfer, and his swing coach was there, and I learned, a huge amount around the mechanics of golf, and it really was a rich experience for me. Okay, but there were times over a couple of days' work with these guys, golfer, swing coach, me, practice coach, really lovely space, where I was just sitting back watching.
Yep.
And I could have been sitting there for an hour and a half.
Yep.
Without saying anything. And it was actually almost a running joke. And it's almost a running joke now, because I've stopped wearing a watch. Okay? I stopped wearing a watch, and I had it in my head, like, I'm going to stop wearing a watch. I have my time on my phone. So I don't need a watch. The watch and the phone has the time. But it's not on my radar yet that my phone is a watch as well. So I don't know what time it is, and yet the phone is in my pocket. But I would have found myself, and I find this happens to me a lot. And again, the way I work, I don't go in and do a 1-hour session with someone. You don't. If I work with someone, I'd say, okay, so we'll meet for 2 days, and we're going to work for 2 days, because we're going to go and we're going to dig deep for 2 days, so that at the end of that, it should already be beginning to transfer, rather than an hour here and then an hour a week. Yeah. And that's just my own model. But I'll fly into place or drive into place or whatever, and I will see someone for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days at a time, and we will rip it up and tear it apart and build it back together and whatever, and then you go away. But in those days, I'll find myself sometimes, what time is it? And you're like, what? We're here 5 hours, or whatever that will be.
Well, it's a bit. You're in flow, aren't you? You're kind of like in the zone or whatever, which is kind of where we kind of find ourselves here. And I'm just very conscious that I'm taking up far too much of your time. I love PEAQ, and I'm sure you've piqued the interest of the audience. Do you see what I did there?
Very good.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there's a round of applause going around the room. You can't all hear that, but that sounds fantastic. And I'd like to explore more of that, the praise, the explore, the affirmation, the questioning. So, Ed, would you agree to come on again in the future?
As I said to people, like you said before, I go away from this. I have, and just so you're aware, I have 5 pages of notes that I've written down from this. So that's
one word per page.
Look ahead to the end of August, and where I go back and go back over my coaching notes. I have 5 pages from this chat alone, where it's going to just challenge what I'm doing and make me
Ed, how can people get in touch with you? Where can they find you? Give us a lowdown.
As you said, my spectacular website, which I set up a while back and I haven't been on since, but there is a contact thing on the website at drskillack.com. I'm at Dr. Skillack on Twitter, and just an email, drskillack@gmail.com as well. As I said, my last few years, I love the idea of just chatting with people, and it's no agenda, no nothing. Coaches, athletes, practitioners, and whatever want to get on a call. Great, let's talk stuff out and see. Can we just just try and figure stuff out together? Because I certainly won't be able to figure it out on my own.
Tempting a barrage of emails coming through. Can we talk, please? Can we talk, please?
You'd be amazed. Not many. There's a lot of people out there who like the idea of going to a dark place about what they do. Because I know I was in that place, and it can get a bit ugly, but it's also very rewarding.
Listen, dude, I have a whole page of notes that I haven't asked you, all about consequence and evidence-based and games-based constraints, loads of stuff.
Let's do video someday.
Loads of value bombs. But look, mate, thank you so much for giving up your time. I'm sure there'll be lots of people in touch. And Dr. Ed Coughlan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Take care. So that was Dr. Ed Coughlan. I always love speaking with Ed. I get so much from talking with him, and I hope you did too. If you did, please leave a review, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. That was loads of fun. I'm already looking forward to next week's guest. I hope you can join me then. Bye for now.